We're going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the view. This meeting has been provided on the Commission's website. Hayden, please take a roll call of the commissioners.
Commissioner Carter, Commissioner Griscom.
Here.
Commissioner Lehrman.
Here.
Commissioner Levine.
Here.
Commissioner Marino.
Here.
Commissioner Patterson.
Here.
Commissioner Eddie Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Lawrence Smith.
Here.
Chair Richard.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 8 members present. We have 4.
Thank you. Are there any opening comments from the commissioners? I would like to note that Commissioner Carter informed me of his absence in advance of today's meeting and is excused per commission policy. Okay, seeing no comments, today we will hear reports from the committees that met yesterday, followed by several presentations by staff. First, we will begin with any in-person public comment, then we will move into reports from committees. Business operations will provide us with an overview of enterprise risk management and operational updates, proposed 2027 meeting dates, and some budget updates from Director of Finance and Operations, Lawrence Walker. Then from the School Performance and Accountability Committee, Deputy Director of Authorizing, Maggie Lund, will provide updates on commission school interventions, reopening process, the 25-26 school year, and a preview of school year 26-27. We will then hear several LEA policies, commission policies, and commission rule update for votes from the Rule Policy and Governance Committee presented by General Counsel Ashley Thomas. We will then move on to presentations from staff. Ashley will present a new charter agreement for Libertas High School, as well as MOUs with geographic districts. Data and Accountability Coordinator Rebecca Lever will present on the statewide charter school landscape. Manager of Strategic Initiatives Pam Lehman will present an update on our strategic plan. Beth and Ashley will then provide our annual New Start Appeals refresher, and we will close with updates from our Executive Director, Tess Stovall. Are there any questions or comments about our agenda? Commissioner Smith?
Madam Chair, just before this meeting started, one of our commissioners was insulted with thinking this was Auburn Orange. So I'm wondering if we should add an agenda item and have Commissioner Patterson lead us in the Tennessee National Anthem, also known as Rock God, this morning. No question. A motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
What just happened?
Second. Okay, do I have a second? Somebody?
Second.
All right, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Or any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. Our next matter is the minutes of the meeting held on June 2nd, 2026, which have been provided in advance of the meeting. Does anyone have any edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed?
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. In accordance with Commission Policy 1.200, we have reserved time for up to 30 minutes of public comment. Hayden, can you please let us know how many written comments were submitted and introduce any individuals who have registered for public comment?
Madam Chair, we did not have anyone register for public comment and did not have any written comments submitted.
Okay, thank you, Hayden. All right, we will move on to the Business Operations Committee report. I would like to recognize Commissioner Eddie Smith to introduce these items.
Thank you, Chair Richards. At the Business Operations Committee, the committee heard updates on enterprise risk management and operational updates. Proposed 2027 commission meeting dates, the FY26 budget, amended FY27 budget, the proposed FY28 budget, and pre-approval for the grants management system. I'd like to recognize Lawrence Walker to present these updates.
Commissioner Smith. You said yesterday in the Business Operations Committee, we discussed many key budget updates, including our FY26 fiscal updates and budget to actuals, including our authorizer fee tracking and our district PPA amounts. Additionally, we introduced the FY27 amended budget and FY28 preliminary budget for review and approval. And then we had a conversation around procuring our grants management system and introduced the vote to officially begin the procurement process. Finally, we heard our agency staffing and operations and the enterprise risk management updates from our executive director and manager of strategic initiatives. But I'll take any questions, provide additional detail for any of these items.
Seeing no questions, are there any other matters from the Business Operations Committee?
Do not believe so, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, board.
Thank you.
As well. All right, whoops, we've got a couple things we have to do. I'm sorry. We have to have a motion to approve the 2027 commission meeting dates.
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I don't see any no's, so the ayes have it, and the 2027 meeting dates are approved. Do we have a motion to approve the amended FY 27 budget? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the amended FY 27 budget is approved. Is there a motion to approve the preliminary FY 28 budget?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the fiscal year 28 preliminary budget is approved. Is there a motion to approve the engagement of a procurement process for a grants management system?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, motion is approved. Thank you, Chairman Smith. The next item on our agenda is a report from the School Performance and Accountability Committee. Commissioner Patterson, I'd like to recognize you to provide the report from the committee's meeting.
Thank you, Chair Richards. The School Performance and Accountability Committee heard presentations on commission school interventions, pre-opening process, and updates from the 25-26 school year and a preview of the 26-27 school year. I'd like to recognize Maggie Lund to present these items to the commission.
Thank you, Chair Patterson. Yesterday, we had a great conversation around one of our key authorizing responsibilities for high quality authorizers, which is charter school intervention. We went through the plans for all of the schools that we have currently on intervention, their tiers, their next steps, and when you can expect updates based on the plans of correction that are outlined. We heard updates from Sophie Binnenfeld Gilmore about our pre-opening process and our 2 schools that are going through the pre-opening process to open in school year 26-27. We also talked through some school year updates. We talked about governing board engagement. We reviewed our portfolio of schools now that we have 26 schools opening and operating within school year 26-27 across our 2 main districts of Memphis Shelby County and Metro Nashville Public Schools, but also in new districts, Rutherford and Jackson Madison. And then also Maggie Stampley talked through some risk assessment items for special populations of students.
All right. Commissioner Patterson, do you have any additional comments or thoughts?
No.
Okay, I want to thank Maggie Lund and all of our staff for the hard work on this committee, and we will move on to our next item, which is the report of the Rule, Policy, and Governance Committee. And I would like to recognize Commissioner Lauren Smith for this item.
Thank you, Chair Richards. The Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee had a discussion of several LEA policy updates, commission policy updates, and commission rule updates. I'd like to recognize General Counsel Ashley Thomas to please present this item.
Thank you, Chair Smith. During yesterday's Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee, we completed our annual policy review, updating our policies in alignment with the 2026 legislative session, as well as any business practices. I think for this commission, I think the biggest change from what was drafted, we did update Commission LEA Policy 4406. There was a slight change, excuse me, from and to or in the Internet Safety Policy. And then there was the final reading of our News Communications and Media Relations Policy. But these are ready for a vote, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions from any commissioners? If not, do we have a motion to adopt the LEA policy on the consent agenda for first and final reading? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion has been approved. Commissioner Smith?
Chair Richards, the committee also heard several commission policy updates. Ashley, you're it.
Thank you, Chair Smith. On yesterday, we reviewed, Commission Policy 3.010, which is our new start policy, that was updated to reflect the change in law that required, a sponsor that is seeking replication. They have to be open for 3 years instead of 1, and so we changed our policy to match that. We also updated Commission Policy 3.600, which is our renewal policy, to reflect the change in law that recognized high-performing charter schools for an automatic renewal, as well as our public hearing standard for high-performing charter schools versus schools that don't meet that standard. But these two policies are ready for a vote.
Do we have any questions or comments before voting on these two items? If not, do we have a motion to adopt commission policies 3.010 and 3.600 on first reading? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion is approved. Commissioner Smith?
Chair Richards, the final items the committee heard were commission rule updates. Ashley, you're it.
Thank you, Chair Smith. We looked at two different sets of rules yesterday in committee. They both will require a roll call vote. The first is the amendment appeals rule. As discussed yesterday, we are proposing to move all rule related to the actual petition itself for an amendment to the State Board of Education. We're working through timeline, so there's no gap in rule coverage. We will retain the appeals information, but the actual amendment petition information will go to the State Board of Education. And then our second rule packet is our replication rules, which we have to run again as we didn't receive the positive recommendation we needed from the Government Operations Committee, but these are ready for roll call votes.
Right, before we vote by roll call, do we have a motion to adopt Commission Rule 1185-01-01-0.04 on first reading? Second. All right, Hayden, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Griscom.
Aye.
Commissioner Lehrman.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Commissioner Marino.
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Eddie Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Lawrence Smith. Chair Richard.
Aye,
Madam Chair, you have 8 ayes.
thank you. The motion is approved. Do we have any questions before voting on the next item? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adopt Permanent Commission Rule 1185.01-04 on final reading? We have a second.
Second.
Hayden, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Griscom.
Aye.
Commissioner Lehrman.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Commissioner Marino.
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Eddie Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Lawrence Smith. Madam Chair.
Aye,
Madam Chair, you have 8 ayes.
thank you. The motion is approved. Thank you very much, Commissioner Smith. And Ashley, thanks to you for all your hard work on these annual updates to our rules and policies. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a new charter agreement for Libertas School of Memphis. Ashley, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Richards. This charter agreement is being brought to the commission following the approval of Libertas's replication application for a high school. This will create a K-12 for Libertas. It's a separate agreement. We've negotiated final terms. It is ready for a commission vote. They will enter into an articulation agreement that will be approved by our executive director to create a pathway for all of their students, but I'll take any questions on this agreement at this time.
Are there any questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve, to adopt the charter agreement for Libertas School of Memphis?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is passed. Staff is also working on some new MOUs with geographic districts as a result of a statutory change. I'd again like to recognize Ashley to present this item.
Thank you, Chair Richards. We previewed this yesterday during our policy update. The statute was recently changed to allow for the commission to enter into MOUs, excuse me, with geographic LEAs where we have charter schools to provide support services for our schools. As you know, we do not hire staff, we don't, establish schools, but our schools still need some support. In particular, what we have been speaking with these districts about are related to special population services, special education services, excuse me, as well as alternative schools. There would be a daily rate prorated for any services that our schools would use, but these MOUs would grant access to those services that are offered by the geographic LEA that we just do not have the ability to offer to them. We currently have an MOU signed with Memphis Shelby County. We are working to update that as we see necessary. We have begun conversations and have gone one round of terms with Metro Nashville, Rutherford County, and Jackson-Madison County, but we are still in negotiation there. This particular vote would allow for our executive director to sign off on those final terms, and that would help our schools. Our hope is to have this done in the next couple of months as schools start, and so that our schools will have access to that as they need it. As we grow, we've noticed that our schools are finding it more and more difficult to maybe serve some of the students, or we have students that our schools have different discipline codes. And so students are being suspended or expelled, but they have nowhere to go. There's no way to return to education. And so these MOUs, our hope is that it will create a pathway for them. But I'll take any other questions at this time.
I recognize Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair Richards. Actually, are these MOUs required for the districts to enter into, or is it an option?
So the way the law was written, they are required to. Yes.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so do I have a motion for approval of staff to negotiate final terms and to designate the executive director as signatory on the MOU?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion is approved. The next item on our agenda is our annual look at the statewide charter school landscape and data and accountability coordinator, Rebecca Wiedemann. Rebecca, you're recognized.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Richards. Good morning, Rebecca Ladebor, Data and Accountability Coordinator for the Commission. Today, I'll be presenting the annual charter landscape presentation. This is in preparation for the upcoming appeals season. The goal of this presentation is to provide insights about charter outcomes from across the state. And then I will also be providing a preview of commission-specific outcomes from the most recent school year 25-26. So as you all know, charter schools are public schools. And so all of the data that I'll be talking about today is going to be in reference to public schools across the state. They are funded by TISA, held to the same accountability structures, laws, state board rule, and teach the Tennessee academic standards. We'll be answering a few questions, looking to know who attends these schools across the state, and then looking at the outcomes. We'll be talking about two different types of public schools today. We'll be talking about charter schools. Charter schools are independent schools run by nonprofit boards. And then we'll be referring to non-charter public schools. These are any other public school in the state. They could be a zone school, it could be a magnet school, could be neighborhood school. All are included. We'll also be talking about different types of districts. In particular, you're going to hear me use the term geographic district. This is a district that has a geographic border, much like Knox County. And then the juxtaposition of that would be a district like the Commission, where we are statewide. We'll also be talking about different subgroups of students. Students can be classified into subgroups. They are allowed to be in multiple subgroups, and we'll be referring to the 4 that are represented in our school performance framework. That is Black, Hispanic, Native American, or BHN, economically disadvantaged, ED, English learners, EL, and students with disabilities, SWD. And of course, we can't go further without additional context. The data that we'll be looking at today is all publicly available. The department has a fantastic website called Data Downloads, highly recommend. But a lot of the data on there does have suppression rules applied. So in order to have the cleanest possible data, we did submit a data request to the department, which they granted. And so that is going to be in our presentation today. Additionally, good context to know about enrollment, because it does change every day all throughout the state, is we are going to be looking at a snapshot. Typically, this is the October 1 enrollment for the schools. And then last but certainly not least, this presentation focuses on school year 24-25. That is the last complete set of data. So we are going to be looking at this at a lag. We're going to be starting to answer the question, who attends charter schools, and looking more closely at the market share across the state. We'll start statewide and we'll get more and more narrow as we move forward. So looking at students that are attending public schools in the state, about 4.5% of students attend a charter school. When we're looking at just districts that have charter schools within their borders, we're looking at about 13%. This is less than what we've previously looked at, but not because there's been a big shift in population. Rather, it's because Rutherford County now has charter schools represented within their state, or excuse me, within their district. So these numbers have remained relatively the same since we began this presentation. When we're looking at the numbers behind those percentages, that's 114 charter schools across the state, a little less than 45,000 students across those 7 different authorizers. So now, getting again a little bit more narrow, looking at those districts, I'm going to start by orienting you to the slide. So we've got a graph on the left, a table on the right. The table on the right represents the 7 different authorizers that were in existence for the 24-25 school year, and then the previous number of schools that they had in the 23-24 school year. So I think that's important context to have because it is a changing field. On the left, you are going to see the enrollment percentages for the 5 geographic districts that have charter schools in them. So you have the 5 districts. The red portion of the graph represents the students that are attending a non-charter public school. The blue portion of the graph represents the percentage of students who are attending a charter school that is authorized by that geographic district. And then the gray is the percentage of students who are attending a charter school authorized by not that geographic district. So that would be either the commission or the achievement school district. So if I'm looking at Hamilton County, that means of the students enrolled on October 1st in 24-25, 6.5% of public school students attended a charter school in Hamilton County. There are some shifts in this data. You'll see Rutherford has entered, and so they've gone from 0 to 2 schools. That's why they have a small percentage represented. Then you also see in Nashville and Memphis, about 1/5 of students attending a charter school. So again, moving a little bit more narrow, continuing to think about the students, we're going to be talking about the subgroups. So on this slide, we're looking at the subgroups of students attending charter schools. You see 4 clusters, each representing the 4 subgroups that I had mentioned earlier. Then within each of the clusters, we have red, which represents charter schools, blue, which represents non-charter public schools, and gray, which represents all schools statewide. So this means if we're looking at that red bar with the 49% above it, that means of the students that were attending charter schools in 24-25, 49% of them qualified as economically disadvantaged. So as you can see, similar to what we've looked at in previous years, charter schools continue to serve a greater percentage of Black, Hispanic, Native American, and economically disadvantaged subgroups compared to the non-charter schools within those same districts. Then when we look at students with disabilities and English learner subgroups, you see more comparable rates. While there have been some slight fluctuations, yes, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm just curious, the two clusters on the left, Black American, Native American, and economically disadvantaged. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of correlation between those generally. But what conclusions, this may not be a fair question, and you don't have to answer it, but I'm just curious, what conclusions would you draw from the fact that almost 90% of the students in charter schools are African American when only 40% are in non-charter schools?
So the 40% is the statewide. So we're looking at 63% in non-charter schools in those same districts.
Still a pretty big gap.
You know,
I mean, is it because the charter schools are generally trying to identify or identify geographic areas where the minority and impoverished student, economically disadvantaged students are not feeling well served by the traditional school setting, and they need something more, I think, more tailored to what their specific needs are? Are charter schools making themselves more available to those economically disadvantaged populations? And families in those communities seeing the charter schools as a better alternative than the traditional school? I know it's way deep.
It's a great question. So I think a part of it dates back to the historical context of state law. That when charter schools were founded and the statute was changed to allow charter schools in 2002, schools were limited to who they could serve. And it was a school that students who were zoned to a priority school, I would say just generally an at-risk. So what we saw is historically, most charter schools were formed in the major urban areas of Tennessee because of the way statute was limited. That opened up in, I think it was 2010, 2011, but I don't think we moved the needle on expanding choice outside of the urban areas because of the way kind of people in Tennessee think about charter schools. What we actually see in other states is sometimes we see the exact opposite, where more charter schools are serving a higher population of non-economically disadvantaged, a higher population of white students because of how their statute was originally written. So I think it's more of a legacy issue and that we're starting to see that change in terms of where schools are located and who they intend to serve than it is a direct correlation between where charter schools are choosing to locate.
Let's proceed. Commissioner Maureen,
Just speaking for Memphis or MSCS, where most of the charter schools are, most of our district is this population. What? So I think that's probably a big part of the answer.
Commissioner Grissom, that is what we don't see here. Is this on? That's Alan, where you are and what Tom just said. Geographically, should we put in here the actual makeup of the school districts that have a predominant number of charter schools? So then when we do, to me, this is reflective. If I think of where I live in Hamilton County, and students served, then I look at this and say, okay, I've got a pretty good sense of that school district and the makeup of that school district. What I get a sense and look at this, I think the average person might, is they think of the whole state of Tennessee, rather than understanding where the predominant number of charter schools are. And that's why these numbers look the way they do. Because if I put in the 91 other counties and the makeup of schools and the students that are there, this numbers, I think, is very different. And so I look at this in terms of trying to explain this to somebody, Eddie, and where you used to be serving in the legislature, to give them the snapshot of what we're talking about here. That we're comparing this I think, across the state. Whereas, does it make sense to look at this in terms of the population we really serve and where the predominant number of charter schools are? So that's, you know, a different comparison. That's the question.
You're absolutely right. In the next couple slides, we're gonna do that, just that. I do think it is worth us just acknowledging that when we look at where charter schools are located and in Tennessee, and then you look at nationally, there are states that have more suburban charter schools, rural charter schools. We as a state just haven't gotten there yet in terms of the authorizing practices. So I will give it back over to Rebecca to dig right into that question.
Well, before we do that, and I want to follow up on something Tess said. And I think what she laid out from 2002 to 2011 still carries forward today. Because I think when you look at what we see, even applications that come to us, and the push out of the legislature, which is we want choice for students who are trapped in failing areas. That continues to be, that's why I think this continues to be. And I think, again, you look at the slide before this, what everybody needs to remember is Tennessee we're one long state with three very distinct subdivisions of the state. The issues on the eastern part are vastly different from some of our issues on the western part of the state. And when you look at like in Knox County, for instance, great school system, you don't see very many charter schools for that, but you also have to look at what's in and around Knox County. You've got Oak Ridge to the north. So you have this technology corridor with the University of Tennessee sitting in the middle, a much higher percentage of people with bachelor's degrees or even master's degrees than some of the other areas. So I think there's all kinds of other factors at play that go into that other than just, it's just based on race. I think you've got to look at some of the other factors in and around the community that may be driving why there's more schools in certain areas than there are in others. So just know, I think that's still at play to Tessa's point, which is the intent behind the legislature, behind everybody is we want to make sure we're lifting all kids up and giving kids who do not have the right opportunity, an opportunity to have what everybody else does. So I just want to make sure that's clear, that's still very much embedded in the culture of the state.
Okay, we'll move on, Rebecca.
So I do want to provide some more detail here by authorizer. So I want to start by orienting you to the table that you see on the screen here. Across the top, you're going to see the 7 authorizers across the state. The 5 on the left are going to be the geographic districts, and then the 2 on the right are the statewide authorizers. Then you see each of the subgroups that we've been speaking about listed on the left. And then if there's a difference between the charter and non-charter population within that district by more than 5 points, I did bold that so you can see those differences. Similar to what we saw on the statewide percentages, generally we see charter schools serving a higher percentage of the Black, Hispanic, Native American, and economically disadvantaged subgroups. And then we see more similar percentages for English learners and students with disabilities. I do want to provide a little bit more context for 2 of the subgroups. The first one being students with disabilities. I think this is important context to have as we're going into appeal season based off of the conversation we had with Maggie Stampley yesterday, and in preparation for a conversation you'll hear a little bit from my colleague Katie Bridges. For Knox, Nashville, Memphis, and for the commission, we have seen an increase in the percentage of students with disabilities. This is particularly important as we are thinking about the challenges to staffing for special education programs. For our district in particular, we have seen an increase in students with an IEP for autism, which aligns with national trends and does require a high level of expertise. We will also continue to see a variation in economically disadvantaged. This goes to the criteria to qualify as economically disadvantaged, as Medicaid free and Medicaid reduced are no longer qualifying criteria. So now that we are understanding who attends charter schools across the state, we are going to start to look at outcomes. And of course, we're going to start with context. This is not the commission-focused portion of this presentation. We are going to be looking statewide. Additionally, we are going to be looking at 3 years of data over the next few slides, starting at school year 22-23, 23-24, and then 24-25. As in previous years, the Achievement School District is not included. The goal of this portion is, again, to provide that context as we are going into appeal season and thinking about how we continue to increase the outcomes within our state. The first metric that we'll be talking about is the letter grade. So letter grades were first issued in 2023. And before we start looking at the outcomes for the letter grade, I want everyone to understand what is being factored into the letter grade. So on the screen, you see 3 pie graphs. You'll notice that each of those has a big old 50% blue chunk. That is absolute achievement, which means in order to get a letter grade C for achievement, you have to reach a certain threshold for that success rate. There is no growth measure or AMO reflected in that. It is absolute achievement for 50% of all grade bands. Then when we're looking at elementary and middle, the remaining 50% is going to be growth. You see that 40% as the Tennessee Value Added Assessment System, or TVAS. And then that 10% is going to be the growth of the highest need students. What they mean by that is they took all of the students who are enrolled in that school, they look at the students who are performing in the bottom 25%, and they're looking specifically at the growth of that subset of students. So that's for elementary and middle. Then for high school, you see that really pretty blue, that's college and career readiness. This looks at, of the graduates of that year, what percentage of them earned certain criteria to be deemed college and career ready. This could be getting a certain score on the ACT. This could be getting certain industry credentials. So those are the elements that are factoring into the letter grade. Now, this is our 3rd year having letter grades, which is really interesting. So on your screen, you see the outcomes for school year 24-25. It's our first stacked bar. So on the left, you've got charter schools across the state. On the right, you've got non-charter schools that are in a district that has charter schools. Blue is a letter grade A, that's good. Red is a letter grade F, that's bad. This is the first year that we have seen non-charter schools have a higher percentage of letter grade C or higher than charter schools. This is when we're looking at overall letter grade. I, of course, had to dig deeper. So I started to look at the achievement letter grades specifically for charter schools. If you're looking at that 50% chunk, that absolute achievement, since the first letter grades were issued in 2023 to this most recent, charter schools have seen an increase in that letter grade C or higher by 13%. When you look at the percentage of schools that charter schools that have an F for achievement, that has decreased by half. So then the question comes, does that mean growth isn't happening? No. My best theory is that we're starting to see TVAS right size back to what it looked like pre-pandemic. So right after the pandemic, there was that giant blue chunk for TVAS. We're now starting to see those look more similar to what we saw in 2019 when it was the last release prior to the pandemic. But I think this goes to show that there's a lot of great growth happening across the state, and accountability does matter. So in continuing to think about achievement, the next series of slides is going to be looking at success rate. So success rate is the percentage of students who have reached proficiency on the TCAP assessment. We are going to be looking at it across all accountable grade levels. I think this is an important point because there are some publications that only look at grades 3 through 8. We are looking at all accountable grades, so grades 3 through 12. Again, we're going to be looking at those same chunks. We're going to be looking at the success rate of charter schools across the state. Then we're going to be looking at the success rate of geographic districts with charter schools. This is inclusive of all public schools. And then we are going to be looking at the success rate statewide. Again, this is going to be inclusive of all public schools. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this slide because it's the first one that we have in this orientation, and then we'll move at a little faster clip. So for each of these slides, you're going to see in the title of the graph, the subject area and the student group that's represented. You'll see 3 clusters of bars. This represents the 3 school years. So 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25. Then the red bar represents the charter school success rate. The blue bar represents the success rate of geographic districts that have charter schools within them. And the gray represents the success rate of the state. Now, one thing that is really exciting to see as you're looking at this graph is the growth in each chunk. If we look at that gray bar going from 38% to 41%, that means that there are thousands of more students who are proficient in the state on English language arts. Now, I know that 41 is by no means where we want to be, but it is exciting to see this continued trend of growth across our state. You will also see when we are looking at the all students group that generally charter schools underperform the resident district and the state success rate. Well, yes, ma'am.
Rebecca, did you say earlier this is the first year the districts with charters have kind of outperformed?
In the letter grade, yes.
But is this also the first year that Rutherford and Knox County have been included in that?
Well, Knox has been with us for quite some time.
Rutherford, I imagine, pulled that up. I'm just curious, like if
Yes.
Rutherford was pulled out, given that there's only 1 or 2 schools, 2 charter schools. I would just imagine the bars might look different if we're mainly looking at Nashville, Memphis for most of the schools, or is that, you think, accurate? Or
I do think that Rutherford County has been quite successful as a district. It's been really exciting to look at their numbers as they've entered the chat, so to speak. But I do think that this trend that we're seeing today is the same trend that we've seen in previous years. Here we are going to see the success rate for math, all students. And again, similar trend here. We see growth across each type of school, and we see charter schools underperforming the resident districts and the state success rate. Yes, sir.
You talked about this before. In your all chart, are you able to break out for us charters that are part of the commission and charters that are with a school system? So we could look at that to see how our schools are performing vis-a-vis all charters, other charters that are not part of the commission. We talked about that before. I mean, I'd like to see that, but my concern is making sure that when we're up there talking about support for our charter schools, that we're in your orange bar. Our schools might be up here, whereas the others that aren't part of the commission are a little bit lower. Are you able to look at that at some point?
Yes, absolutely. I think in presentations that are commission focused, I can certainly slice it out that way. And there are some slides later when we get to that portion that do have it broken out by our schools in their resident district, because I do think that is a very important comparison to your point. And then when we have full release of data in the future, I will be more than happy to look at commission schools, charters that are not commission schools, then those resident districts. All right. We're now going to move into our first subgroup slide. This slide is going to be a little unique because it only represents 2 years. This just has to do with the quality of data we had for school year 22-23. And so in order to not have messy data up there, we're just looking at the 2 years here for students with disabilities. So on this slide, you're going to see two graphs. You'll see English language arts on the left, you'll see math on the right. And this is representative of the success rate for students with disabilities by school type across those two years. This slide underscores the needed focus on and supports for students with disabilities. Again, this harkens back to the conversation we had with Maggie Stampley yesterday and is teeing up a very exciting conversation you'll have with my colleague Katie Bridges a little bit later this morning. The next subgroup that we are going to look at is English learners. And here you're going to start to see a different trend when you're looking at the comparative performance between charter schools across the state, the resident districts with charter schools, and the state success rate. Here we do see that charter schools are outperforming both those resident districts as well as the state success rate for English learners. Up next, we've got economically disadvantaged. This is the same setup, but a slightly different trend. We are continuing to see charter schools outperforming the resident districts, but not quite the state. And again, as we move to the last subgroup, this is Black, Hispanic, and Native American, the large population of students that are attending charter schools. We again see something very similar to economically disadvantaged, where charter schools' success rate are outperforming the districts, but not necessarily the state. Now, with all of these graphs, the question becomes, what does that growth look like? So in the next few slides, we are going to be looking at a new graph to look specifically at that percentage point growth. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I want to go back because I think these last two slides you showed are actually more reflective. Because if you go back to the fact that, what was it, 89% of all the charter schools serve this population, and then you look at these gains against like populations within the rest of it, this is more of a true math because of that 89% than looking at just charter school to the resident district as a whole. So I think this is where we really need to kind of make sure people understand you're actually now comparing like to like instead of apples to oranges. So again, as you were going through it, that just kind of like triggered for me, like, because I was concerned, and then I see this, I'm like, now wait a minute. You look at math for this population, we are on par with the state within this population. Charter schools are on par. So again, just one of those things that just popped in my head as you were going through this. I wanted to make sure it was very clear for anybody watching online.
That's a more eloquent way of saying what I was trying to point to earlier.
Yeah. Is that the opposite helps with that?
It is parents of knowing the structural history of how they ended up where they did. The bottom line is that charter schools disproportionately are demonstrating improvement for the economically distressed population where those charter schools are available. And unfortunately, people gravitate to the previous slides when they try to say charter schools are underperforming, but that there's a disproportionate number of economically disadvantaged and minority students in the charter schools. And when you take that population and compare it to the whole population, you would see that same disparity if you were not looking at charter schools, but public schools who primarily serve this population. So, I mean, I'm saying this for the purpose of the record, to the point that you were making. You've got to compare similarly situated populations to see whether the charter schools are truly making a difference. And of course, based on these last two slides, it looks like they are.
I think it's also important to underscore the importance of having subgroups in accountability systems. And I commend you all for having a school performance framework that does look at the comparative performance across those subgroups. So thank you. So this is our new slide. You're going to see 5 clusters of bars. Each of those represents a different group of students, the far left being all students, and then the subgroups that we've been speaking about in the other 4. We're continuing to look at red as charter schools, blue as the resident districts with charter schools, and gray as the state. The bars demonstrate growth. So on our very first English language arts slide, we talked about the statewide growth from 38% to 41% in that success rate. That 3% growth you see as the +3 here in the all students. And again, we're seeing growth across the state. This is also starting in school year 22-23, which is when a lot of folks were talking about being post-pandemic. And so it's exciting to see that that growth has continued. And now for math, and as a former math teacher, I'll point out that a lot of these bars are higher than the language art. But I think it's also really exciting to see the growth that's happening in the resident districts. I think we've got some good partnerships with the folks that we are working with, and it's exciting to see what's happening. So continuing with this idea of growth, we're now going to be shifting from looking at percentage points growth to looking at TVOS. So for those of you who don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, TVOS is the Tennessee Value Added Assessment System. It's a statistical analysis of student performance that sets up what is expected growth per student and then sees if the student has achieved that growth. Districts, schools, and teachers receive composites, which were incredibly helpful when I was a classroom teacher to reflect with, to let you know if students are making that expected growth, if they have accelerated growth, if you're changing that trajectory in a positive way, or if you are not. So here, you are going to see blue as level 5, red as level 1. Level 3 means that a student is continuing on in the expected trajectory of growth. Level 4 and level 5 means that growth has accelerated. Level 2 and level 1 means that it has not. You see on the far left, these are charter schools across the state. In the middle bar, we're looking at non-charter schools in geographic districts with charter schools. And on the right, you're going to see statewide. So these are starting to look more like what we saw pre-pandemic, but we're still seeing 75% of charter schools, their composite growth is either meeting or exceeding the growth trajectory expected for their students. The next portion of this presentation, I think speaks a little bit to what Ashley was talking about with the MOUs earlier today, and we're looking closer at the student experience.
Just, and can we go back? So I want to clarify. So in the TVOS system, if you are a C on this slide, that means that the student grew 1 year's worth of growth. Is that 1 year's worth of growth of where they came in to where they lived that they're being evaluated in, or where they were expected to start and end, which means that their growth was actually greater? Because when you look at the TVOS score, it's a 1 year growth. And if they exceed that 1 year growth, they get a higher score. So I'm trying to understand how many of the schools in that 20% move students to where they should have been, but maybe didn't grow beyond that expected 1 year growth, but they came in low.
So the way the TVOS analysis works is it looks at the historical performance of the student. And so if you've got little Rebecca Ladebor who loved her math classes but did not like her ELA classes, maybe had a couple years of low math scores, they would expect that my math score would still remain low, but I would see the growth based off of having a solid year with a teacher. If I, for some reason, really shut it out the park, then that outcome would be higher than what is expected. So it is looking at 1 year's growth, but it's also looking at the previous performance of students. So it's not comparing, to your point earlier, apples to oranges. It is looking at the student to themselves.
And the reason I ask that again, it goes back to trying to dispel a lot of myths out there, of which when teachers say, well, you took low performing students and you just grew them exponentially. So it's you're getting an unfair growth. No, we're looking at the individual student, not, and again, I'm trying to make sure that in this data that we're kind of helping to dispel some myths out there so that it's not charter schools are just on paper looking better. It's actually the students are moving at a pace that we were expecting them to within their growth trajectory. So that's why I'm asking the question the way I am.
One other question, this has been really helpful. Thanks, Rebecca. You mentioned the importance of looking at subgroups and you mentioned, the fact that all of us are in fact doing that. And to Eddie and Alan's point, that I think that's really elucidated some of the important advantages that charter schools are providing to these disadvantaged subgroups. My question to you is, are there other subgroups that you have considered looking at? And are there other subgroups that we might want to look at that might reveal either improvements that charter schools are making or just somehow allow us to go deeper in some group that we haven't shown enough focus on?
That's a really insightful question. Thank you, Thomas. So in the federal accountability system, they do look at a number of other subgroups. So that, for example, they break out BHN and look specifically at Black and African American, Asian. There's also super subgroups for schools that are more homogeneous to make sure that they are looking at students who might not fit with that majority. I use the school performance framework as my North Star and the subgroups that we are looking at. So I think it's up to the will of the commission if there are additional subgroups that you all would like to see reflected. Oftentimes we have access to that, but I would say for most accountability systems, the 4 that we have are the golden standard.
Well, that's great. I mean, we could return to this. I think one of the interesting questions is, are there subgroups that are disadvantaged that we're not looking at? And then are there potentially subgroups that are outperforming but for whom charter schools are actually accelerating their growth above and beyond what they would get in a traditional public school? So in other words, not a subgroup that we might not consider to be quote disadvantaged, but is benefiting disproportionately being in a charter school. Is my point clear?
Yes.
I'm just not sure I'm communicating clearly. I want to make sure.
Well, Commissioner, what subgroup do you have in mind when you think of someone that's not mentioned? Like, what do you have something in mind?
Well, I mean, one is we use Black, Hispanic, and Native American. I mean, you could cut the Hispanic in a different way, which is recent immigrants. We look at Hispanic speaking persons, but those persons could have been in the country for 20 years, right? Or 30 years, or at least the families, whereas you could look at recent immigrant families. That's just one example. There may be others that others have looked at. I don't have a preconception about which ones we should look at, but I could imagine, and then there may be high performing groups too that are captured in national level data that might be worth looking at.
I'll say that for charter schools that serve very specific populations, the ones that you see doing quite well are the ones who have data systems that look at all different sorts of subgroups specific to the kids that are within their school, and then the difference between the subgroups. And I think I'm thinking about some of the conversations we've had at the end of year meetings with our schools that have those strong data systems. That's where you're really seeing some outstanding growth. But one common subgroup that we could start to look at, particularly in this next section, when we're thinking about student experience, we're looking here, we're going to start looking at discipline data. I'm going to start with context, so don't get ahead of yourselves, because it is important context to have on how this is calculated, but in thinking about gender. I think that's always one, and it is represented on the state report card by gender. And I think it's good to look at. It's not in this one, but in future ones, I got you. Yeah.
And to Tom's point and Terrence's question, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So I guess a question that I would ask is, as we look at the last 10 years, as Tennessee has really gone after economic growth and bringing multinational companies into Tennessee, Are we seeing any growth of any new populations that we might not be looking at traditionally, an Asian population, something like that? And are we seeing any increase of that population within the charter sector or a resident district that we can start looking at some of those additional subsets that we just don't even know about? I'm basically, what don't we know that we don't know?
I think that's it's really interesting because some of the ways that census forms are filled out and feel inaccurate. I'm thinking about a number of the schools in Southeast Nashville that serve a large Egyptian and Middle Eastern population, but it's not reflected in Lawrence knows this all too well. It's not reflected in a lot of the ways that demographics are sliced that we normally see.
A lot of it is probably self-reported.
Yes,
So it's only as good as what.
correct.
Right, going down this rabbit hole. What about, I know traditional schools kind of test for like gifted and talented, and those students often get an IEP. How does that show up for charter schools? They wouldn't be included in the students with disabilities group, right? Or
No, so the students with disabilities group, in order to qualify for that, it does not include, Katie, you'll have to help me if I'm wrong. I throw something at my head if I'm wrong.
It's a state disability category. I'm not sure if it's included in like T-Ball state or things like that, but typically it's federal.
So for the federal group, it does not include if you have an IEP for gifted or I believe functional or dyslexia, I believe, potentially.
Correct. And as a parent of a dyslexic child, happy to go far into that. But that's correct. So the state counts what Rebecca just said, but both from a federal funding standpoint and also from a federal accountability standpoint, they are not counting students who have IEPs for functional delay or who have IEPs for gifted. Now, the state requires you to serve them, right? But in terms of how the feds count it, and then also IDEA funds, schools are not getting funds for those students.
that might be down the road. I'd love to know how students who are coming in, especially as our schools diversify, we want to be sure kids at all levels are continuing to be pushed and achieved. So I don't know how you really track that. For Valor, that was always challenging to know how do you kind of serve at all levels, but down the road, maybe that'd be something we could dig into.
I do think I'm reflecting on a conversation we had with one of our schools who had noticed their TBOS scores not continue to be a level 5, and they dug in deeper. And again, if you have strong data systems, it is so beneficial to every student within that building. They recognized that they needed to challenge some of their high performers more, and the next year was level 5.
One small comment I made on the data systems, I mean, this could be for a future conversation. To the extent that the data systems can label a student as residing in more than one category, in other words,
Duly identified.
yeah, it's like, lots of labels, like a person can be both, a Hispanic speaking person, but also an immigrant, or, they can fit into a lot of categories. So if we're allowing that, where those systems allow those a labeling approach as opposed to like a bucketing approach, I think that's helpful. That advice if they don't know that already.
So I'm going to start by providing some context about discipline rates. I think it's helpful to understand how it's calculated before we look at the outcomes of the numbers. So in a discipline rate, in order to be counted in the percentage, a student will be counted one time. So I'll use Pam and myself as examples. Pam had one rough day. She had one incident of in-school suspension. I had one rough month. I had multiple days of in-school suspension. We are each counted one time as a student who had a discipline incident. It does not matter the number of incidents. Then for the denominator, it counts any student that had over a day enrolled at that school. So if you have somebody who just popped over for a week, decided it wasn't for them and moved on somewhere else, they are reflected within that denominator. Then when we're looking at each slice of discipline, it's the same thing, just how many students receive that in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, what have you. We'll be looking at any type of discipline incident, so the overall rate. We'll be looking at in-school suspension, excuse me, out-of-school suspension, and expulsion. And to Ashley's point earlier, schools and districts set their own policies about what qualifies to earn an in-school or an out-of-school. It varies widely. When we were having discussions about this with staff, we learned that some folks did not have any type of in-school in their schools. So again, wide variation. This is what we're looking at when we're looking at school year 24-25 school discipline data. Same setup that we've seen in previous slides, red being charter schools, blue being non-charter schools in geographic districts, and then the gray being statewide. Then it's grouped by discipline type. So any type of discipline event on the left, in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and expulsion.
Can I ask you, are we able to track absenteeism?
Not yet, but we are.
No.
Yes, sir.
But I'd like to see that, you got this performance,
Mhm.
the absenteeism, but I also like to see the number with charters and everybody else, because we know, I mean, there's been stories, recent stories in Memphis, Shelby County, about efforts to really try to drive down and prediction that you're going to have it. And so I would love to be able to look at that, see how we're doing, because I think we all understand the absenteeism, the impact it has on performance. So thank you.
Question for you. So many, you just said schools vary wildly in how they have policies. It's now 2026. We've been doing this for a few centuries. There is enough data out there on all of this. Has anybody looked at pulling together some evidence and some best practices to help our district schools come up with more uniform policies, so that when we're looking at this, it's looking at this more evenly instead of so wildly, because it varies from school to school, district to district. I love when you all ask these questions and everybody else there goes, I really wish you hadn't asked that question.
No, not at all. I think that is what is a challenge in this data, is even with our work with resident districts, their threshold for expulsion, out of school suspension differ, right? When we've had conversations with Metro Nashville as a part of our MOU process, they have their own discipline matrix. When we've had conversations with Rutherford County, they have their own discipline matrix. And those are just the county systems. We're not even getting into our charter schools yet. And our charter schools have a varying level of discipline code. And so where we have really come to as an authorizer is we respect the autonomy of our schools to make their own discipline decisions. What we look for is, are you following your discipline policy and providing students with due process? I think what I like about this slide is it really highlights that the myth that charter schools are expelling students at a higher rate, disciplining students at a higher rate, is simply not true. I do think the higher out of school suspension is really a staff capacity issue in terms of room in the building to have an in-school suspension classroom, staff to manage an in-school suspension classroom versus just simply not having the space. And so the out of school suspension is the move for charter schools. I look at the expelled student percentage. Charter schools are expelling fewer students than traditional school districts are. Their overall discipline rate is lower than the geographic districts with charters. And so to me, I'm excited that we're starting to look at this data. And also, this is a tricky data set because it really does vary by district and also by school.
I guess this is something that the performance and accountability committee may could look at is, do we need to come up, we've got all these rubrics. Do we need to create a discipline rubric that looks at evidence-based best practices and then be able to overlay that with the district so that we know, is this more aggressive or less aggressive than what evidence-based practices should tell us, so that we know where those schools line up. And then the district as a whole, when we're looking at this data.
Absolutely. And I think a part of this MOU conversation is actually forcing us to get our hands around more of the student discipline, because we are going to have to be the gatekeeper when it comes to then working with our local districts. So we are setting up a system where we have to be notified more regularly around student discipline, expulsions, out of school suspension, so that we can then work with the districts, but it will allow us to have a better sense of where everyone's at. And then when we work with our local districts, have a sense of where they're at as well. So I think when we come back next year, we'll be able to have a much bigger picture of what our schools are doing, how they compare to their resident districts, just because of the work we're doing around the MOUs.
When new schools are coming online, setting their policies, practices, how they, I assume y'all are connecting the leaders in schools who you believe are doing the best job in this area with.
Yes, typically as part of the pre-opening process, one of the things they have to do is submit their policies to us. And what I'm looking for is that they're consistent and clear, and that families really understand what it means to attend that school. But we, like Ted said, because we're beginning these MOU conversations, we're getting a better picture of what the geographic districts use as far as discipline, because some of the conversation is about the threshold to access some of those things related to discipline. So we've really begun those conversations and look forward to learning more.
Okay, let's try to keep going. You can't give us data. I do appreciate it. I think these are great questions and a good way to drill down on this. This is, a constant thing that we grapple with, because you can't manage and improve what you don't measure. And so these measurement criteria are very important, and we appreciate your hard work.
Absolutely. So we are ending the portion of this presentation that is that statewide look. We are now going to shift and looking specifically at commission outcomes from the most recent school year, 25-26. This is not accountability data yet. This is an estimate. It is a snapshot. It is not final. The numbers that you're going to see are representative of the students within that school on testing day, not necessarily the students that are going to be accountable to that school or district. Some of the data that you all have seen is still under embargo. This portion is not. So we are going to be talking at state and district level. This is our first slide. This is going to be the estimated success rate for all students in English language arts. This is a different setup. On the left cluster, this is in the Metro Nashville Public Schools geographic order. On the right cluster, this is in the Memphis Shelby County Schools geographic order. The red represents the success rate of the portion of the commission that is within that geographic order. The blue represents the resident district's success rate. The gray represents the state's success rate. So Commissioner Griscom, this is reflective of. You'll notice that we do not have Rutherford County up here. That is because we had one school in Rutherford County, and school level data is still under embargo. So here we're looking at English language arts. You can see that The charter schools in Metro Nashville are right in line with the resident district outcomes. And you can see in Memphis Shelby County Schools, the ELA outcomes were below the resident district outcomes. And then the gray bar there as the state. I think it's important to remember our schools that are in Memphis. So we have 8 schools represented. Let me double check my notes very quickly. Yep. We have 8 schools represented in this Memphis cluster here. 6 of those schools are previous Achievement School District schools, which means they at one point in time had been identified in the bottom 5% of the state.
And on this one, so when you have the Memphis Shelby County being involved, that includes all Memphis Shelby County, including the charter schools that they still got.
Correct.
So that's part of what we talked about earlier is being able to pull that out. So we're able to look at how our charter schools are doing in Memphis compared to the charter schools that Memphis Shelby. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
There you go, Margaret. When you can't do it right this second, because it's in Margaret,
Yes.
but we have a school in that Memphis area that is on a PIP, let's just call it a PIP, a performance improvement plan. Well, one that we're seriously concerned about. I'd love to see, because again, we hold those charters accountable and we will close them. That's something that we have shown as a commission to do. I would love to see what does that percentage look like if you remove that one, if it continues on the trajectory we're headed. Because I'd love to know what's the actual percentage of schools that are doing well compared to the ones that we're needing to look at. And I know we can't look at school level data yet. I'm just trying to look at where that number moves to and how much it's dragging down that percentage.
Yeah, I think the other thing we'll have to look at is there a notable difference between K-8 schools and high school?
Yep.
Because I think it's a different ball of wax as far as, where students come into the school and what's the expectation for when they leave. So when we move forward with this and you cut, as Commissioner Briscoe was asked, you might also want to do a cut with it broken out by grade, K-8, which is high school.
And I think that'll become increasingly more important as we're gaining more high schools in our portfolio. Now, the next graph, the last one, I know you're sad, is all students math. Here you're going to see commission schools are in line with their resident districts, though still continuing to underperform the state success rate. But to points that were brought up earlier, this is looking at all students. It is not broken down by subgroup. Moving forward, we are going to continue to monitor and share trends and outcomes with the commission so you all can make informed and data-driven decisions. As data releases continue to happen, we will share those with you, and then we can plan for a full data review following the January 2027 release.
Right, we've had a lot of questions and some good discussion. Are there other comments or questions?
I just want to say thank you to the staff. I mean, having all of this data really does help us as we're looking at things, and especially looking at this in light of the appeal process that's coming up. So I just want to thank you.
I want to join in that. I think everybody really appreciates your work, Rebecca, and also your thoughtful presentation. I know you have to be patient with us. Myriad and different questions. We appreciate your hard work and that of your staff. So thank you all very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is an update on our strategic plan from Manager Strategic Initiatives, Pam Lehman. Pam, you're recommended.
Thank you, Chair Richards. Pam Lehman, Manager of Strategic Initiatives, and I'm going to share our update on the strategic plan. Just want to also say last year in July was my first meeting and my first strategic plan update, so it's been kind of fun to reflect on the previous year and look ahead to the next year. But today we'll cover 4 main points. We'll talk about our outcomes or how we did in the 2025-26 school year in relation to the strategic plan. We'll talk about some proposed revisions we have to the strategic plan, primarily around the action steps that were created. We will discuss reflections from commission staff that we had in a step back meeting with the leadership team, and then just general next steps and looking ahead. And so before I do jump into how we did in the 25-26 school year, I do just want to note the strategic plan was adopted in March of 2025. So we've completed a full year and are officially into year 2 of the strategic plan. When it was adopted, we said that it would guide our work for the next 3 years. So we're in year 2 and thinking ahead to timelines for when that will ultimately be updated at the end of year 3. But looking back on the 2025-26 school year, this cycle we successfully met our benchmarks for the strategic priorities. Each month, the leadership team meets to discuss the priorities, the action steps, and then the benchmarks we have set to make sure that we are meeting those action steps throughout the year. And so we track whether things are on progress or in progress and on track, whether they're behind schedule or they've officially been completed. And so as we look to the 2026-27 school year, we're really just focused on maintaining that momentum and really thinking about the long-term goals of the outlined in the strategic plan. And so revisions that we have proposed to the strategic plan, I just wanted to highlight because we do have that charge of just thinking about how we can review the strategic plan annually, think about things that we need to update just to make sure that it continues to align with the commission's strategic priorities. And so the revisions that we have, the red line has been provided in your binders, but the 4 core strategic priorities will remain the same. Our mission and vision will remain the same. What we wanted to revise were some of the action steps. So each priority has multiple action steps underneath it, and then the staff had developed benchmarks to help measure progress towards those action steps. So today we're just proposing revisions to various action steps just to really improve some of the clarity, the alignment to the priorities and just usefulness of the team when we do have those monthly team meetings and how we discuss it. And to highlight some of those key changes, we wanted to change some of the language to, in first part, focus more on implementation rather than communication. We're still going to communicate, but when we did develop new frameworks, last year communication was very important, but this year we really want to focus on implementing, monitoring, evaluating. Another thing that we did was we added language to highlight just the need to reduce administrative burden on schools, whether that's by streamlining processes or simplifying some of our procedures. We also revised some of the language for in our team meetings and our discussions. It will provide more ways to have data-driven discussion and make some of them a little bit more measurable for us to discuss. We also combined some language that seemed to be a little bit redundant and overlapping. So we combined those to make them just clearer for the team. And we also added stronger opportunities to gather feedback from schools and ensure that we are receiving feedback from community and stakeholders and also communicating transparently with the community and stakeholders. And so switching gears just a little bit, in those monthly meetings that we do have where we would discuss the strategic plan, we also discuss the long-term goals of the commission. And so in June, we had a step back meeting with the leadership team where we met to discuss the 2025-26 school year and reflecting on it. We talked about the upcoming school year, and then we talked about the long-term goals of the commission. So in that meeting, we met on 2 separate occasions in June, but we just talked about what's working well, what are some highlights, things that we want to continue doing. Talked about challenges that we faced this past year and how we want to fix those for the upcoming year, ways that we can improve operationally, ways that we can improve our communication and collaboration, and then just general planning for growth of the commission. And so some key takeaways from that meeting, just to share, were that we noted that staff identified stronger communication across teams, even with new members joining the team, though we still know, there's always room to improve collaboration, communication across teams, and communication with stakeholders. The group also emphasized the importance of strengthening collaboration and establishing processes that can scale as the commission continues to grow. Another takeaway was we discussed the development of the new training schedule and how we've received positive feedback from that so far. Last year, we had just virtual trainings. This year, we've added virtual and in-person trainings, and so far received great feedback, but continue to thinking how we can tweak that to continue supporting school staff throughout the year. And lastly, we recognize just improvements in general responsiveness of support provided to our schools, particularly with risk assessments and site visits. And so for general next steps, after that meeting, we already started implementing some of that feedback pretty quickly right away, but some of those things we'll just need to be discussing ongoing in future monthly meetings. So the final thing then is that our next step is we would need a vote from the commission on those proposed changes to the strategic. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Commissioner Griscom.
I want to apologize right up front, but since I deal with words, so just a few suggestions. If you look at strategic priority 2, action steps first 1, we use the word support schools twice in this thing. So I would suggest if you consider to start by saying provide technical assistance to support schools. Okay. If I take you to strategic priority 4, action step 1, that is a sentence that it would probably take me a lifetime to get all the words out. I would suggest a period after the word funding. When you've got your new red line, start with regularly accessed, so that it makes it a little bit easier to digest it, rather than people saying, wonder how long this sentence goes. This was just a suggestion in priority 3 in the first one. My thought would be, we know these processes are already available. So I would say, consider saying ensure complaint and grievances process provide an additional opportunity. So it's more of an action type thing, since we know they're already there. So thank you for allowing me just to sort of put my editor's hat back on, and that's it.
Have a discussion in the board.
Okay, we'll move on. Are there other specific comments? We appreciate your thoughtful editing as always. Staff does too. Other folks have comments on this policy? This plan? I'm trying to get to kind of keep this. I want to have a little conversation on the whole process that we're using, but I want to go ahead and address the motion.
I'm sorry.
No, but
The conducting surveys in strategic priority 3, is that currently done, or is that something that we're contemplating doing in the future? And just so we are doing it, it's helpful to know what we're doing with that.
That's your
Thank you for that question. So yes, we regularly ask for feedback and conduct surveys on a variety of different topics with our schools, including what assessments, federal program support, site visits, just regularly saying, we've completed this, we would like your feedback. and then we use that information to make changes to our policies or procedures or how we handle things. So that's an ongoing part of our work, is collecting feedback and then implementing that.
There's usually a person on the school staff that's the recipient of that survey, and they get it on like a quarterly basis or.
It depends on the event, right? So it's not every quarter we're sending the, but for example, we'll send one to our federal programs folks at the end of the year saying, what did you think about our check-ins, our trainings, et cetera? When assessments are done, we'll send a note to our schools and say, how was the implementation of assessments this year? What do we need to make changes for? When we complete our site visits, we'll do that. So it really is specific to the individual on the staff who we are working closely with, because depending on the team, sometimes it may be the same person, sometimes it is not the same person.
Okay, other questions or comments on the wording of the strategic plan?
So a question, if we make them, when we make the motion, do we need to make the motion respective of Commissioner Griscom's suggested change? I'm not an editor, so I'm making sure that we're doing this correct. You're affirming his edits. Yes. Affirming his edits make it.
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the updates to the strategic plan, including the comments reflected by Commissioner Griscom.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
Second.
all right. All in favor, say aye. Okay, any nay? All right, but that motion's approved. Now, I want to take just a minute and talk about the strategic plan process, because one of the things that has been a huge improvement over the last few years has been that we have moved away from a strategic plan that is a book that's on the shelf that maybe once a year somebody pulls out and looks at, to a working document that is regularly the subject of a monthly meeting. The various groups on the staff provide input on how we're accomplishing the priorities and the particular actions. But what is even more important, it's guided by direction from this commission. One of the things that Commissioner Griscom pushed very hard on was us constantly looking at our policies, practices with respect to, are these things necessary to run our schools? Are these things as burden-free as they can be with respect to our schools? Because they have a lot of paperwork and other requirements, and the last thing they need is more from us that don't serve some important purpose. And then also, is the communication with them about what's expected clear? Now, we're going to get feedback from the in-person training, which I was able to go to a little bit of last week in Memphis, and see how the in-person updates and training went versus trying to do these remote. But I was encouraged by what I saw. I think the schools were very appreciative. They were willing to take time, and keep in mind, they're within a week, 2 weeks of school starting, to come spend some time and make sure they understood what was expected. So it'll be interesting to see what the feedback on that comes back to us. And I always encourage, and the staff's been encouraged, to be sure that we talk with our school, we get good communication, and also that if there are issues and we act on them, that we communicate the actions back. That's one of the things that I believe, if you're going to survey and come up with plans of what you should do, then there should be a measurement of the action, and it should be a point of accountability. So this is a very ongoing process. And as we go through this year and go through the various steps of our review, if you have areas of priority, you should feel free to reach out to Tess and let her know where you are, where you're coming from. And this is a working process. It's always going to be something we can do better at. But with that, I just want to thank Pam for her hard work during her first year. It's been a joy to work with you, and we appreciate all your hard work, and we look forward to great accomplishments. Well done. All right. There's no other comments. The next item on our agenda is an overview on the new start of youth process and a preview of our work over the next few months from Director of Authorizing Beth Figueroa and General Counsel Ashton Thomas. Beth and Ashley, you will recognize.
Thank you so much, Chair Richards, and good morning, everybody. Hard to believe, but we are currently in the process of gearing up, and we actually have already started our appeals process. And so the purpose of today's presentation is to not just ground us in what the appeals process is going to look like over the next few months and ahead of the October meeting, where you all will be deciding on the batch of appeals that we do receive. But we also carved out time specifically in this presentation. This is something we haven't done in the past, but as we continue to reflect on the opening of a lot of our schools that we've opened over the last few years, there's a lot of learnings. This last school year, hard to believe, we opened 7 new schools, and there were a lot of learnings that happened as a result of that. So we want to take time in today's presentation to have some of our staff share firsthand what we learned, what we took away from supporting schools throughout that process. So that way you can take that information into the next set of appeals. And so to begin, we always continue to ground ourselves in our principles of quality authorizing, and that's just, we want to make sure that we do a thorough review of applications. We have our review committees, and we talked about this earlier today, but just understanding the autonomy that our schools have, that they are responsible for executing the plans that they set out in these applications. And with that, we then, as their authorizer, hold them accountable for the execution of that plan. And so at this point in time, this is a list of active applications. These are schools that are either currently under consideration with the local district, or in the case of the first one, it has been denied, but the appeal has not yet been received. So there are 9 applications on this slide. We have 1 out of Hamilton County, 4 in Memphis Shelby County Schools, and 4 with Metro Nashville Public Schools. As mentioned, Hamilton County Schools has already voted to deny that application, where we believe we will be receiving that appeal. And then Memphis Shelby County Schools and Metro Nashville Public Schools will be voting next week. And so we are quickly looking at appeals coming our direction. And then on this next slide, this is our first active appeal. And so we have already begun the review of 1 application, started that review committee process. And so looks like a pretty robust list, but we will see what happens at the district level in the coming week. And so next, this is a graph that everybody is very familiar with, but just a reminder of kind of what takes place over the next 75 days. And so upon receipt of an appeal to the Charter Commission, that's based on the application being denied by the local LEA, we have 75 days to conduct our de novo, or our fresh look of the application. That's looking at the application with fresh eyes, not looking at why did the district deny, but what does the application say in connection with the state scoring rubric. We conduct our capacity interview with the applicant. That is a key part and component of our application review. We also gather information from the LEA to understand what process they undertook in the review of the application, why they came to the decision that they came to. And then we conduct a public hearing within the local district bounds. That's to hear and receive public comment. All that information goes into the findings recommendation report, which our Executive Director, Tess Stovall, will present to you at the October Commission meeting. And then you all will have the opportunity to either approve, authorize the school, or uphold and affirm the LEA's decision to deny. And so diving in a little bit deeper into our process of conducting a review, this is just that reminder of the different components. And so each application is reviewed by a review committee that is comprised of individuals with expertise in all areas: academics, special populations, operations, finance, governance, all of those pieces. And this is both individuals that are external to the commission, as well as our staff. All of us kind of all hands on deck. We're all reviewing these applications. We have already, as I mentioned, kicked off a review committee, and we've also formed review committees. So we are ready to hit the ground running on any appeal that may come our way. After the review committee does their initial review of the application, that's when they sit down with the applicant group. So the founding team member who's going to be founding the school, as well as the governing board, and they have that capacity interview to ask questions, to seek clarification on the application itself. And following that review, the review committee does create a review committee report, which summarizes the consensus of the committee. The report submitted to the executive director in consideration for her recommendation. But from a review committee standpoint, an application must meet standard across all categories in order to be recommended for approval by the review committee. And the next is the public hearing. As I mentioned previously, this is a key component of our process. This is our opportunity to get out into the district. One of the applications that we have is Dyer County. This is our first application received in that area. So there's nothing that can be done that could be better than to go into the actual community and see firsthand the application, the community, hear from them about the appeal. So the public hearing does take place within that geographic LEA. During that hearing, our executive director asked questions of both the applicant as well as the LEA to seek to understand more about the process, the application. And then we hear public comment. We hear the voices of those in the community, some of which are in favor of the approval of the application and some that are in agreement with the district's decision to deny. We, like other years, will continue to provide you with public hearing dates and times so you all are able to attend if you are interested. We post the dates, times also on our website, so that way that the community can attend. And we also will make sure that everybody receives a recording of the public hearing as a part of your record as you review and prepare for the decision. Next, we know that it takes a lot of work for you all to prepare for the appeals, especially if we are looking at multiple appeals. And so we will be taking action on all appeals at our October 8th and 9th commission meeting. And so by August 15th, we will know how many appeals we are looking at. We will have received all materials. And so at that point in time, we will make sure that you have all application materials available to you. Next, we will start conducting our capacity interviews. Usually it's kind of late August timeframe, early into September. And so as we have the public hearings, as we have the capacity interviews, we will make sure that you all have copies of those recordings available to you, as well as public written comments in advance of the meeting. And then finally, in advance of the meeting, we will provide you with a copy of the executive director's recommendation. So now shifting gears to assessing the readiness to open. We've spent a little bit of time in our presentations talking about what it takes to open a school, the significant lift that is required. However, we want to spend some time in today's presentation, as well as I have my colleagues here joining me to reflect on some of the things that we've learned from our schools. And so that way you can kind of take that with you and the little nuggets that we discussed today as you review applications and assess the capacity of individuals to execute the plan that is in the application. And so first, as you all conduct your review of the application materials, as you watch capacity reviews and public hearings, these are just some guiding questions to keep in mind when you are focused on what makes an applicant a high quality applicant and application. And so first and foremost, you're looking for an application that's supported by a well thought out plan. There's evidence of success, whether it be evidence of success in the model, evidence of success by the applicant group in the work that they've done prior to working through the application. Next, you're looking for a model that is sustainable. And so that in order to do that, you have to have not just a good solid model, but you have to have the right people on board. You need to have the necessary finances to maintain the school. The governance is the governing board engaged. When we do the capacity review, are the governing board members in attendance? Are they answering questions and prepared to serve all students? And the next, we know that all applications will have certain items that maybe there's remaining questions that you're wanting to get further clarity on. But when we're looking at what is material, you're looking at what are some of those areas in the application that may be in line with other or common reasons why a charter school fails. Those are the areas that would really be the red flag. No, this school is not ready to open yet. However, if it's something that is workable throughout the pre-opening process, that's more minor in nature. So that's something that you're thinking through in your review. And the next, does the school demonstrate readiness to open?
And so with that question, it might be, well, what does it take to be ready to open? And so on this slide, I'm going to start by going through a few of the challenges that we have seen firsthand for schools. And then I also want to share with some of my colleagues will share firsthand what they have have found as helping schools open, because even though we do have a robust pre-opening process, we know that a lot of the opening activities happens in year one, and a lot of the challenges continue in year one. And so first I want to talk about enrollment trends. Yesterday we went through our pre-opening updates, and we are so thrilled to see that our school that's opening next year is fully enrolled. However, we just want to emphasize that is not the norm. That is a school that's opening in a brand new geographical LEA. People are excited for the enrollment opportunity. However, if we have applications in areas that have more options and choices, enrollment does still continue to be a challenge. So we are looking for a robust plan to ensure that the school can adequately fill the seats that they have and that they're planning for. Facility challenges, we talked about this previously. This continues to be, and I think it was actually one of our school operators that said, in order for a school to open, they already have to have a solid plan for facilities. It's not something that they can just kind of hope to stumble upon a facility. They need a solid plan going into it. Staffing landscape continues to be difficult to staff positions, particularly areas of special populations, high school positions, or those that are more specialized. Financial planning, we've spent a lot of time the last few years, and we will continue to focus on contingency planning. What are you going to do if the CSP grant is not received? What are you going to do if your enrollment doesn't materialize? Because it's really important that our schools have the flexibility to pivot in case finances don't come in. And then board capacity, we continue to emphasize the need for strong leadership, an active governing board who's engaged in the opening of the schools. And then next, I want to talk about operational compliance. And this is once a school opens, they have all of the different requirements, special populations, the student information system. And the best people to share firsthand what it takes to open a school are my colleagues who support schools directly in their opening. So first I'll have you go ahead, Katie, and share a little bit about your experience.
Before we go there, yes, maybe we've done it. It's been a year since we did some of these, so my cobwebs in some areas. When we look at the financial planning, what I think would be helpful is what is the sustainability number? So if the enrollment is to be at 100, but they're going to be at 60, but the point of operation stability was 80%. Where are we at in that? That's what I look to see for each kind of application. Like, where is their enrollment? Where is their break even, and all of that as we're going through this process?
That is a great comment, and I think you'll be happy to hear that we have a new application as well as a new financial template, and in it, applicants are required to put a minimum or like a best case scenario budget, and they're also required to say this is the absolute floor that I can operate on. So now, instead of just asking them, we have the ability to actually review both scenarios.
Good morning. In the area of special education as it relates to staffing, at the time that data was collected for our risk assessment process at the beginning of June, 11 of our 24 charter schools had more than 50% turnover in their special education team. So whether that's special education teachers or leaders between August 2025 and June 2026. And that includes 6 out of the 7 charter schools that are in their first year with the commission. So recruiting special education teachers just continues to be an issue for many schools. So it's important that New Start applications include strong plans for special education teacher recruitment. Schools are also seeing an increase in the enrollment of students with disabilities, including students with significant academic or behavioral needs that they may not have anticipated. So it's also important that a New Start application can show that schools can support students with high needs that enroll. So things that I look for might include whether the school has the budget to hire additional staff, such as a paraprofessional,
or if the staffing model has the special education team just wearing too many hats during the first few years, such as a staff member serving as both the special education teacher and an administrator. And then in terms of operational compliance, commission staff have found that schools are more effective at keeping up with special education implementation and monitoring when they've identified a staff member other than the school leader to manage these tasks. So while schools have the autonomy to develop their own staffing plans when reviewing applications, this would be considered a strength. Is there any question?
In the application process, and again, I've webs upstairs, but I can't keep everything. Do we ask for schools in that plan, like, okay, you're telling us what you're gonna do, but then do we require, have you got any active MOUs that you've started? If you can't provide the, the counselors in-house, that you've got an active MOU with an outside agency for referral to serve those kids. Is that part of what they have to submit, or is that something we should look at adding? That they're providing us with agreements that they've got for that, so that we can actually review that against what they're telling.
So that level of information is not necessarily asked for in the application itself. However, it is certainly an area that we can lean into in the capacity interview to ask more specific detailed questions to garner where they are at in the MOU process, in the hiring process, as well as understanding clearly what their staffing structures are going to be, because oftentimes they will say in the applications that they will be hiring, say, a special education administrator, but then once they get in that pre-opening process, sometimes their priorities shift. And so one of the things we're talking about as staff too is to really leaning into the school startup plan and holding them accountable. So if they say in the startup plan that they would be hiring an administrator, then when we have our regular check-in, say, how are you progressing in the hiring of that administrator, and being more intentional to, again, holding them accountable for the plan that they said they were going to execute in the first place.
So that's something we may want to just discuss, not saying we have to do it now. We may want to kind of look at that as either a letter of support, letter of commitment, or an MOU that is part of the application process, because as a lot of these schools are also applying for grants, even through like SAMHSA or any of those others, they have to have those letters of support, letters of commitment, or MOUs to submit with the grant proposal. That may be something worth having as part of this process, so that we can see, do you actually have that to support the grant that you say you're going after in this process?
Commissioner Crystal?
And so Beth, when we look at the leadership and board capacity, are we able to capture there? If it's a school that's already got multiple schools already, so we're able to know how that board, how that group has performed. So as we're doing this assessment, we have that from it. That would be that'd be helpful to know, so that we're able to go back and say, well, they've got 3 or 4 schools now, and this is sort of their track record to date. So we're able to gauge that, whether that's a strong organization or not, or if there's questions there that we ought to look at or know about that you probably historically could pull together. So that would be useful if you're able to do that.
Yes, absolutely. In addition to pulling that information together, particularly schools that do have a track record that have been open and operating, going back to that, we have a new application. The rubric is highly focused on whether or not that school has already been successful as a means of meeting expectations.
This is probably the one slide that you want to pull out and take with you as you start looking at the appeals that we're going to have. What we've recognized with the market increase in the number of schools that we approved is that there are areas of concern consistently with the new start process. And so the staff was asked to reflect on what we've learned through the last couple of years in the process of identifying who's really ready to go forward, because I think that's one of the things that makes this very difficult. Because of the timing of the appeal process, we are well into the fall of the year before these schools would open in August while we're considering these appeals. So what have we learned with our past years of approvals? Well, facility challenges, that's the easiest one because we have seen them struggle with facilities and ask for extensions. So what should we be doing to develop information that helps us understand, are they really ready or are they not going to be ready? Staffing is the same thing. So each of these areas are an area where we've seen some need to really dive deeply on how prepared a given applicant is. Because when we approve them and then we go into the new start process, these are areas where we regularly find shortcomings. So we're trying to learn from our past experience. And so that's one reason why this has been added to this presentation, because it reflects the hard work of this team in getting a better understanding of, what we need to do to do good authorized.
Chris, can I add, you did much better with the point I was trying to put out. Because what we'd like to know, if somebody says, well, we've got this leadership in place, and then all of a sudden we approve them and we find out, well, that leader that came and presented or that was in here all of a sudden is not going to be there. And, we've got this gap trying to figure out, well, who is actually going to be in charge? Do they have the experience to drive it? So absolutely. I mean, that really does help us. And it is good for us to have that reminder so we can see here's the historical background for, for a particular school that's already, in our portfolio or has been in the charter space wanting to come, and we've got them coming to us now. So.
This kind of came from I have been continuously frustrated with our struggle to have them hire up licensed staff.
Yeah.
And why are we always getting to the beginning of the new start? And I can understand maybe having one teacher who isn't licensed or maybe two teachers who are in the process of completing the process. But we've had a couple schools where there's been significant number of non-licensed teachers as a part of their staff, and we should never get there, in my opinion. We should be in a situation where the people we authorize are prepared to have licensed teachers in the classroom on day one. So this is what's behind this, is to try to push into the approval process, the thinking of what are the success components that need to be there. Because if they aren't there, we shouldn't be authorizing. That's
Well,
that's okay.
To both of your all's points, one of the things that, and it's an example here out of Knox County, had a great charter school, but you removed the one person who was the leader of it and it fell apart very quickly. Rather than just saying strong leadership, I would love to see that say strong leadership team. I'd love to know not only who's the principal, who is your person handling HR. I'd love to see that, because that goes back to the hiring and retention. Who is going to be your main leader for that special population? Like, I want to see the team, not just a person, because you could lose one person and still have a strong team. If you only have one person and you lose them, you lost it all. So I think that's the part that we really have to start digging more in, is getting them to identify their team overall for us to look at.
I'm not sure if these new starts have teams at the time of the application. I mean, they're not approved, so they can't even obviously begin identifying. Well, they can begin identifying, but you know what I'm saying? They certainly can have employed these folks in a way.
It may not even be an employee, but like, who on their board has great HR experience? Who on their, I want to know within that overall team, who is going to be helping, because one person can't do it all. So they're going to have to rely on their board. I want to know who has that experience, the relevant experience to help in those areas as they're going through this.
Thank you. And in addition,
Yeah.
okay, additionally, we also have Lawrence here, who is also going to share some of his learnings and experiences.
Yeah, thank you. And kind of building on what you all have said, there, at least in my lens, are two main buckets I think that are really essential for year one schools, early schools. And that's our finance and accounting bucket, and then our data and operations bucket. I think they need dedicated people. So not even just a leader, but a dedicated team at the school level to conduct these functions on paper. And in interviews, it's very easy, like you all have said, to say We're gonna put this on the leadership or even on leadership team, but they'll delegate control to the things later. But what we've seen very consistently is that like those intentions, they don't really translate into the execution. And a lot of those are very important and very tedious. And if you don't do them with fidelity, it'll build up, and then you'll see at the end that too many things don't work at the top because the foundation wasn't strong enough. I call them the skeleton crews that we see, and it's just when staff is stretched too thin, they struggle in their operations. So for their finances, we see people who are successful either hire a CFO or a CPA or accounting firm that can help them with their budgets, with their grant administration, with their payrolls, their audits, their TISA payments. And then for data and operations, the most successful teams have either a chief of operations or a director of operations, an actual like operations team, or a registrar team, something on the ground level that they can dedicate staff to just focus on their data input, the integrity, the validation, because that data is going to inform everything that we've talked about. It's going to inform the finances, the report cards, the assessments, everything that you all are looking at is going to be informed by data.
And part of my question here, when we're looking at that, and this may be part of the pre-opening process, not the application. So let me just state that. Questions that we ask from finance, to Chris's point earlier, do we ask them, is their financial system capable of tracking federal awards versus state awards, and so that it can spit out various reports? They're basically not using Excel and not using QuickBooks, but it's actually using a system that can manage these types of things, so that we don't want any of our schools to get in a problem of being in a financial issue with one of those entities when they win the award. So is that something that we ask as part of the pre-opening? Because again, that goes back to the grant management aspect of it. Like, how well is this application thought out for a grant?
I would say the system itself is not baked into the application process. As far as the pre-opening process is concerned, I'm not sure if Tess or Lawrence have more insight onto at what point we vet the system.
Yeah, so so I would say on the application front, both to the conversation that we're having now and also to Commissioner Marino's point, we aren't necessarily looking for, I have hired Ashley Thomas as my expert. I am looking for, we have a plan. We know that the school leader cannot do everything. So therefore, our plan is to hire this person to handle special education. They will be in charge of X, Y, and Z. We're going to hire this person to be in charge of finances. They will do X, Y, and Z. That will include a third-party contract, right? I think the schools that I have the most concerns about are the ones who walk in and think the school leader can do everything. Or maybe just two people can do everything. And that's just not realistic, right? And so I don't want us to be setting up more to say we need to see the full team, but I actually need to see a strong operational plan that is thought out, that you understand the challenges and that there will be challenges, similar to the enrollment, right? Depending on where you're proposing to locate, if you're proposing to locate in a district that has existing a lot of choice, you need to understand that enrollment will be a challenge, period. Because especially for our new schools who are single site operators, it's really about getting why would I choose this school versus a school I'm aware of? And that's really what we're seeing is like, how do they market themselves as a different choice that people might want to have? In terms of the financial, that's something that we talk about in the capacity interview is like, what is your financial plan? Who will handle it? What will the board's role be? What will staff be? But in terms of the actual implementation in their plan, that's a part of the pre-opening process when we start working through grant setup, et cetera, working with them. I think the good and the bad thing is that we start working with our new schools on grants in April of the year before they open, right? So we are working with them very closely, getting started very early. And so we have, I think, clear sight lines on some challenges that early on before we even start.
Maybe just one
Yes.
clarifying question. On the review committee slide, it says applications must meet standards across all categories and receive an approval recommendation committee. And then you have the assessing readiness to open these various things that you're focused on. Does that mean you are assessing each of these things in the as a sort of standard or a category? I'm just wondering, like, are these elements that are feeding into that process? And is that a change from previous years? Is that is there a new data intake that you're getting or a new forms that you're using?
Yeah, that is a great question. And so within the rubric, a school has to meet certain standards. So I'm just going to call out enrollment. So within the enrollment section and community demand part of the application, there are different standards that have to be met. And a lot of this assessing readiness to open, they are in that rubric. These concepts are found throughout the application and rubric. So these are not necessarily a new set, but I will say that as we actually just trained our review committee members, we did share these learnings with them as well to say, these things matter. These are things that, like the prior slide, here it's the why do schools fail and what are the common root causes. And so we're saying every part of the application is important, but you can have a very dynamic school leader. You can have a very innovative model, but without these core foundational items, a school is not going to be successful. And so all items of the rubric matter, but these areas we need to focus on. So because we always get really excited about an innovative model, but we're always like, but they also have to have. Did that answer that question?
Okay, other questions or comments? Now, keep in mind, the purpose of this is not to make a barrier to innovative charters getting approved in the state of Tennessee. And this commission has done a great job of being willing to, take some risks with the confidence that between our staff and some guidance from our staff as they go through New Start and guidance as they go through their process of operating, we have set them up for as much success as possible. And they're willing to undertake the hard work that comes with opening up these kinds of charters. I think one reason you see some of the results that you do from the local LEA is it's hard work to do this, and it's hard work on the part of the authorizer, and that they've got a whole lot of other things they're working on. But I just want to be real clear, while we have identified areas that it's important that they have a plan to address, this is not an effort or an undertaking to make it so difficult that we can't support new and innovative options. And we're going to get our chance to do this because we've got a couple that we see the ones that may be appealed. Got some opportunity school, we've got some new multi-school operators, and we've got some single school operators. So we're going to be all across the board on this aspect. But I just appreciate the thoughtful approach to this from our staff. And I think we would be foolish if we weren't learning from our now several years of experience doing this, because, if you don't learn from what you've been doing, you're kind of foolish. So are there other comments or thoughts before we declare this segment done? Okay, well, thank you all, and thank you for sharing your experiences as I've gone through this.
Ashley has a second.
Ashley.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's just a reminder of the record and your charge, but I feel like you all already know that, but we'll do it anyway.
Please go ahead.
So when you're reviewing the record, as Beth said, you know that you have to conduct a de novo on the record review of the appeal. I know that we discussed some things that we would like to see, but information that's on the record is the only thing that you can consider. And so we really try to use all parts of the appeal process to build that record to try to address those questions. If it is not there, it is because the record didn't allow for us to ask that question. And so again, like she said, there's no deference to the district's denial, but as part of our process, we do want to know what process they took, what they did look at, why the amended application looks the way it does. I think the reminder here is there are some times that sponsors will email or try to reach out to you all. That information can't be considered on the record. If you receive any of that communication, just direct it to myself, Beth, or Tess, and we will redirect them so that if it is pertinent, if it is something that we can accept, we will make sure that it's included in the record for your review. So when you're looking at the record, I think the good place to start is the executive director's recommendation. That will summarize everything that we've talked about, that we've taken over the 75 days leading up to that decision. It will summarize all of that information, including the public hearing, including that capacity interview.
That's a good question.
Sure.
So going back to the previous about it being a de novo, because this has come up a couple of times where there was information that might have been relevant or helpful. Let me start by saying, I understand the process. It's got to be frustrating if you're Tess and you're using the information to make a recommendation and then new information comes out. So I'll start with the recognition that is clearly a challenge. But what I found, there was one or two situations where I did get contacted and there was information provided that I thought was relevant, at least for us to consider, but we weren't allowed to consider it because it wasn't in the de novo application, but it addressed something that came up during the review. And so we're not, is that related to our rules or is that a statutory
The
thing?
de novo review is statutory. That is, that's the standard that was set by the legislature.
Well, there you go. Okay.
I think the question is if, so we've gone through we've got the application. If, when we had this in one of the ones where they came in front of us and said, hey, this has now happened. They had the opportunity to give it to you all earlier. It's the fact that they have the opportunity to give it to you and don't, that we can't consider versus they give it to you and it can't be included, that there's a determination. I think that's where the clarity for you has to come in is they can't just bypass this
Right.
to give it to us.
And I wouldn't advocate that. I guess what I'm after really is, are we making the best decision with all the information that's relevant? Or are we not considering something because there was I hate to call it I don't know what you'd call it, but it's one thing if they didn't get the answer they wanted, now they're coming to us and wanting us to bypass staff. And I agree, that's not what I'm after. Is there a relevant piece of information that was not available at the time that now is? And would that change the opinion of, or would that change the outcome? I don't know.
Yeah, and this has come up, where we usually run into a concern is it's something that's pretty fundamental. The school leader changes. We've said, no, we're not comfortable. You don't have any plan to handle the financial dividends. And so that is included in Tessa's recommendation. And then, surprise, they have a plan and a CFO. And I think that's the kind of situation.
I don't remember the circumstance.
Well, my point is that I think what this whole process is getting focused on is trying to get them to understand that all parts of this application are important. So they can't just say, well, I'll worry about the financial management after I go. And I think that's your point. And that's where the de novo record is so important because they have an opportunity to, put on the record what they're going to do. And the fact that they don't do it is not really our fault.
I remember one of the tests actually asked in the capacity interview specific questions. They could not answer it. And then they email us, hey, we now have an answer to this. Well, you have all this opportunity. The question was asked. You never followed even back up with tests to clarify that afterwards. You were just coming straight to us. That's where I think the issue came in.
And I think what we do trainings with both applicants and districts before the start. And so we tell them this exact thing and say, you should use every single opportunity you have in an appeal to get any information you want on the record. That includes a capacity. That includes a public hearing. That includes written comment. My personal opinion is if you don't use your avenues that we've given you, then at some point, we have to say the record's closed. We've given you every bite of the apple, and you've either chosen not to do it, or you don't have a plan yet. Not that I want to like bring the like legal hammer down, but we have been sued. And so when we are sued, we say, here is what the commission considered, here was their entire record. And so it is incredibly important that we say, this is what the record is. And we'll get to it in just a second, I think, but we do allow a response to my recommendation, either in person, 2 minutes, or a written statement. We say that is not the time to say, surprise, we have this, but more, here's where we feel like the recommendation was either correct or we disagree with that. And so that's really the final, like, we put everything out on the table. You all are able to consider all that information in making your decision.
Didn't we add the opportunity to, like, if we had a clarifying question, we needed to ask someone from the district or the applicant in the debate, you could do that, or was that not added? Is that more
That's
written
yeah,
comment
right.
or public comment at the beginning is when they would address?
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I was going to wait for your report, but since you brought this up, we've done enough of these type reviews now. You all do training sessions. Do we capture these so that if I want to come on, I'm a new applicant, I want to see what we do, I can pull up a video and we've got them posted so I can then see it clearly. This is the process that the Charter Commission follows. And it's there. Doesn't take away the fact you do not answer questions or have in-person type reviews, but that there's enough, there's a library of information out there now. I can click on this and I get an understanding in general of what our process is that you all are providing. It provided now for what, almost 7 years. Is that is available?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
go ahead. Every training we say, if I were you, I would go online and look at all of the previous documentation. We'll tell you what executive, we'll tell you what we look for. We'll tell you, you can read the review committee reports, you can watch the meetings. So we say that, and we send them a link directly to our website and say, here's all the materials.
And I think in addition to it being our statutory charge that the review be de novo, I think it's important to ensure that we have done our due diligence. So if they come with new information, we want to make sure we have an opportunity to verify what they are saying. It's not a Hail Mary to try to get this final approval. Because like Tess said, our process is transparent. They've heard our questions. They see where the follow-up is. It's in our rule that if we have additional questions, we have a timeline for them to give us a response. So I feel confident in saying to you all that by the time we present you all with the full record, there really shouldn't be huge questions that haven't been answered. I think for you all at that point, it is based on what you see, based on what has been presented. Are you willing to take the risk that these plans will come to fruition and this will be a successful opening for the school?
Well, and to your point, I guess we don't have to listen to Tessa's recommendation.
Exactly.
We can overrule it if we,
Absolutely.
but we can't rely on what we've heard outside of the application.
Right.
We just have to take that leap of faith. Okay.
As a practical matter, how much time before you guys issue a recommendation are you ceasing to receive written comments from the applicant? Because of this question about verifying.
Yeah.
1 week, you said?
1 week following the public hearing is when we close receipt of any like written
I think
comment.
the only additional thing we would receive is a response to Tessa's recommendation after the record is closed.
So after the public comment, there's like you're saying 1 week to receive additional information. And then you verify and then the recommendation.
And typically, if it's something that we are expecting after that public comment, they will have received notice from us of like, we need you to submit this information based on this answer.
That's all.
So just to follow up, because there have been circumstances where some of us have voted not in agreement with the executive director, not because we don't have enormous respect for the courts, but we just had a difference of opinion on a specific application. in that case, so, and I remember I think one time I voted for something that was recommended against. Had that passed and had we been sued, would I likely have been then asked, why did I make that decision? And if my answer was, as long as my answer was based on what I saw, okay.
I
'Cause
was just gonna say, I mean, people can ask you anything you want, anything they want. I think that my response to them would be that the commission moves as one, and the answer was based on the record.
Okay, that helps. I mean, you get to where if you're voting against the recommendation, the logical question is why. So it's probably important for us to at least explain.
Yes, it was based on
the record.
Okay. So in addition to the executive, I'm sorry, Chris, were you?
No, keep going.
In addition to the executive director's recommendation, you will also receive the review committee report. I'm sure this is the review committee report and that capacity interview that is recorded and will be provided to you as well. That is really where our review committee digs in with the team that they have assembled, whether that is board members, staff, whomever. And so at that point, we are really looking at, are they likely to meet enrollment projections? What does their governance structure look like? What do their financial budgets look like? The contingency plans based on what their amended application said. And so that is a good place to look at where those metrics meet against the state scoring rubric. We'll also have the public hearing. There it is. The public hearing, again, that's where you will really hear from the public in that community because we've gone to that geographic district. You'll hear from the local district and why they denied and what they received as part of their process. We'll also receive our written public comments. As we tell everybody, they're all weighed equally. So you'll hear the oral comments, but we'll also turn over to you any written comments we may receive from that district. And so then this goes to your actual statutory charge. If you have reviewed that entire record and you've looked at that amended application and you see that it meets or exceeds the metrics set out by the state scoring rubric, and you feel that approval of that application is in the best interest of the students, LEA, or community, you can approve that application. In considering the risk that Beth has named, if it meets both of those metrics and you feel like it's worth the risk, you can approve that application. At this point, if we have any other questions.
Okay, just for your members, the staff puts these things up as they are available. So you don't have to wait till you get the executive director's recommendation to start going through the record. And if we have a significant number, you're going to find it to be pretty time-consuming process. So just a heads up that it'll be out there and you may want to start as it goes up. As we said yesterday, we will do the committee meetings in advance of our 2 days in October of actual face-to-face meetings in order to have enough time. We have a large number of appeals to go through the appeal, and we will spend Thursday afternoon doing some of the appeals and Friday morning, hopefully. Sometimes it gets into the afternoon to do the rest of them. So just for those of you who are new, what they're stretched on the time on the and as always, the staff is here to answer any questions you have as you go through your review process, and feel free to reach out to them. Is there anything I didn't cover?
One question. What's the variation in our interaction with LEAs regarding their processes for receiving applications? And I'm reflecting a little bit on Beth, your comment earlier, like here's some of the things we've identified as really critical. To what extent do LEAs ask us either for advice or guidance or help in processing, the applications at their level? And are there any LEAs that sort of stand out as having worked closely with us to improve their own processes based on our experience, or the kind of some of the things you pointed out earlier?
So I think overall, we do not advise school districts on their process because we may be the appellate body, and will evaluate an application that they have received. The State Board of Education has quality authorizing standards. They are the entity that does authorizer evaluations. So in terms of feedback on process, more in-depth kind of technical assistance, that is the entity that is working closely with local districts, and we are just participating as an authorizer as well. Once we complete applications and the commission has voted, we always offer feedback opportunities to both applicants and districts to have a conversation with us about anything we may have shared, anything we saw, both, positive and negative. And I will just say, some of the districts we work with very closely because we see them regularly on appeals, so but particularly the districts that are new to this process, we do have a little bit more touch bases with them just so they are clear on what they have to do in it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Beth and team. Ashley, thank you. We appreciate this gentle reminder of what our responsibilities are.
Every year.
The final item on our agenda today will be updates from our Executive Director, Tess Stovall, and a brief look back on a few legislative items from Director of External Affairs, Hayden Pendergrass. Tess and Hayden, you're recognized.
Thank you. Always great to be the last thing on an agenda before adjournment. So I'm just going to touch on the couple things we haven't talked about that I raised in my memo. So number one, the National Association of Charter School Authorizers annual conference is in Nashville this year. It's in late October. I find it a very valuable conference because it brings authorizers from across the nation together. So I just wanted to flag that if any commissioner is interested in going either on a day or the full session, we'd welcome you. We'd welcome to register you. I think we're going to have a really strong representation across Tennessee from authorizers because it is in Nashville. And then the last thing is, as Chair Richard stated, Hayden's going to give a brief update, just kind of as we obviously have wrapped up legislative session, looking into next session, and then we will wrap up.
All right, thank you. I just want to bring up a couple things. Most of the bulk of my legislative update from April was done before the end of session. So most of that all passed then as we discussed there, but there are a couple things I want to just touch on. Add some context to some of the policy changes we made and then look forward to the next session. One thing we talked about yesterday was the new internet acceptable use policy that we adopted, kind of as a tag along to that, but a policy that we're not having to adopt. All of our schools are as related to digital devices. Remember last year, a cell phone ban during instructional time passed. All of our schools have policies now in place to meet that requirement. The General Assembly added on an additional policy requirement this year related to all digital devices used in grades K through 5, with the intent being to reduce screen time, at least among younger students. So all of our schools are working through that policy making process now. We'll be reviewing those at the beginning of the school year and keeping an eye on that. But it seems like that's particularly the General Assembly is probably going to continue heading down in terms of restricting device use in classrooms, especially for younger children. The other the main charter school bill that passed this year added, 3 main points that affect the commission. One was the replication, the change in our replication policy that we mentioned yesterday. In order to apply for replication now, you will have to have been in operation for 3 years. The other 2 pieces of that were the MOUs we discussed today, and Ashley's working through with schools. And we hope that those additional support services will really kind of ease some schools. And then the other piece to that was something Commissioner Levine asked about yesterday related to automatic renewals and what constitutes a high performance school. We worked with the group that had brought this bill to kind of set those parameters. We'll be keeping an eye on that, making sure that those parameters are catching the schools that are intended to be, designated as high performing and receiving automatic renewals. As a piece of that, we had discussed last year and proposed a bill related to flexibility in the length of term that we could give a renewal application. Currently, we have the ability for flexible terms for renewal appeals only. This bill would have expanded that to all renewals that come for the commission. got a significant amount of pushback from the industry, generally focused on financing terms and increase in difficulty of securing financing if without a guaranteed 10-year term. Our thought was that, if a school is struggling, should they be going out and getting, signing us up with big financing agreement if we're not at the point that we would be willing to give them a 10-year term? We had worked with Memphis Shelby County Schools on setting some kind of guardrails onto that, setting parameters for which schools this would apply to attempt to alleviate some of those concerns. But most of the stakeholder groups weren't happy with that either. We're hoping to meet further with them this fall. I want to get some feedback from y'all, make sure that this is still an avenue we want to head down and pursue, and make sure that y'all's interest in having this additional flexibility is still there.
Yes.
Anybody who doesn't feel that that's a good idea. Okay, keep going.
The last piece I want to touch on is something that happened right at the end of session and was an amendment to that larger charter school bill. Putting capped our authorizer fee at $463,000 annually per school. Currently, that only affects one school in our portfolio, and only by about $50,000. So we won't see a large dip in our revenue at that cap. But in discussions with Senator Watson at the end of session, we discussed coming back with a plan to step down our total percentage on the authorizer fee over time and get rid of that cap so it doesn't just affect our largest schools. We're currently working through some ideas on how, the time frame for stepping that down, making sure that we stay self-sufficient on the fee, but then start being able to give some relief in what that fee is to all of our schools and not just the largest ones. So that's kind of where we are. Happy to take any questions about any other legislation or any sort of feedback about those.
Commissioner Griscom.
So Tess, when we communicate to schools the legislative changes, do we also share that with their boards so they are aware from us as a charter commission, so they know what's been going on, and not counting on the fact that the leader of the school will necessarily push it up?
Yes, as a part of our governing board meeting in our presentation to them, we always highlight new legislation that they need to be aware of and that specifically impact charter schools.
And we will, Hayden will report back on his conversations related to this idea of stepping down our fee, to how we might actually present that to the legislature and give us an update in October. And we'll see where we go.
I just note the comment you made, Hayden, about the financing question. The 10 years versus 5 years. The thought just occurred to me, we're hearing a lot of obviously feedback on financing. So that raises this question of the Oklahoma law, which was cited yesterday, just doing a deeper dive on either what that legislation is and how that might apply to our work in Tennessee or other states that have pursued similar kinds of financing guarantees. What might be an opportunity there from a legislation perspective?
Right. And I think now the administration has made some commitments to the facilities fund over the last few years. I think whatever pressure we can take off of, needing to secure financing, the easier chance we'll have at getting this additional flexibility and not having schools worry about that as a concern.
Just to remind everyone, Tennessee is an outlier on this 10-year fixed term. Most states have flexibility on the term for authorization. So
I'm just curious. I'm going to ask the question, opening Pandora's box a second. Here's how the legislature got around the equitable part of the Constitution. Because if we say 3%, but a district is half, they're actually paying less than 3%, which means you're having disparate treatment of districts. And that violates the state constitution. I'm just curious how they got around.
I'd have to get with legislative liaison. I think there were some additional discussions about what that local cap is, and I think that was the fact that we did not have any sort of cap was kind of what flagged this in Senator Watson's mind. But I think overall, getting away from a cap on RP and dealing with just a percentage cut. As we're now, self-sufficient on that fee, I think it's longer term, more sustainable and kind of where the direction we want to head.
And I think, to Chair Richard's point, we're not talking about anything related to the initial 10-year term. We fully support that. We think that's the right move for a lot of different reasons, including financing. I think as we have faced some challenging renewal decisions and will face some challenging renewal decisions, I think, at least from my professional opinion, having some level of flexibility to work with schools that we believe in, but offering you and really having the only option of a new 10-year term or nothing, it really does tie our hands. And anytime I talk nationally to people and I tell them about kind of where we are, I get very jealous of the things that they're able to do to work with schools and work with students to keep that option open while really allowing us to do some more intervention. And I think now the fact that the high performing schools have passed, and so there's a real clear pathway for those schools and schools that are on track, like, that's great. Let's give you another 10 years. I really want us to think about, like, what do we want to do and this is kind of why we had this conversation. What do we want to do for the schools that maybe have struggled, are showing some growth, but we still need to keep a close leash on that.
Hey, any other comments or questions for Tess or Amy? Okay. That being said, we are now at the end of our meeting. And if I can include this closing statement that I have prepared for me, so I won't forget anything.
Well, Chair Richards, as you're doing that, I do want to specifically thank University of Tennessee, and I know you will too, but it's been a wonderful meeting experience. Really appreciate their hospitality. Thank you, Commissioner Smith, for your hospitality as well. But Chair Richards, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm just like preparing to say,
Andy, let me just sort of put this on record. Rocky Top was the song at the University of Tennessee Chattanooga.
how long is that still in Tennessee? And is the University of Tennessee Chattanooga not part of the University of Tennessee?
I just want to be known where the song originally started in the UTC, and then it became big time. Yes, when it got up here with the big R.
You're saying UT comes before city.
Okay, well, on that happy note, I've written down and I want to particularly thank the University of Tennessee for the hospitality.
Humility.
It was really nice to be able to come here and have our first meeting in Knoxville, and get a chance to at least see this part of the state in this context and provide access to people who might be in this area who would want to attend. And thanks as always to everyone for your participation and help and all the staff who helped make this possible. The next quarterly meeting of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission is scheduled for October 8th, but I pointed out how we're going to handle those meetings on the 7th. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you so much.